Hi, today I want to talk about hidden gems in Lucee. First, we start with variable declaration. You're for sure familiar with code like this. You have a query in a function, and to make sure that the query is in the local scope, you first declare the variable above the query, and you normally assign an empty string or something like, or a boolean or something like that. So but in Lucee it's also possible to just declare the variable. You don't have to assign a value here like you see in that example. Let me show that in the code. Here we have the same example, and you see that's what you normally do. You have defined the query in advance, and you always have to assign a value in order to work. But in Lucee you can left that and do it simply that way. That still works. So when you execute that, you see no problem at all. And when we dump the query below here, it will simply be an empty string. So you see we get an empty string here, unless you have full null support enabled in Lucee. In that case you will get null, otherwise like here an empty string. Okay, that's the first hidden gem. Let's go to the next one. The next one is that you can use bracket notation for function calls. Taking that example, you see here I invocate a component, and I call the function getName from this component, and execute that. That is working as expected. I get back the name, in that case Susie. And when you want to dynamically, you want to pass the function name dynamically in any case, you maybe do that in that way. So you have the function name defined in a variable, then you use evaluate to pass the function name dynamically in. When you execute that, you get the same result. But that code is not very nice. First of all, you should never use evaluate if possible, and you will have more troubles to pass in the arguments. Here you have to serialize maybe them and so on. But there's an easier way to do that. Instead of using evaluate, you simply can do it that way. You use bracket notation, so you still have the component test, but instead of having the dot notation get name, you define a bracket. Then inside the bracket you can define the variable name, and then the arguments follow. So that way you can do it dynamically, and when you execute that, still works the same way. So that is using bracket notation for function calls. Let's go to the next one. That is passing arguments via URL of our form scope as array instead of a string list. When you have a form like here, and you define, for example, here in the URL scope, you've defined country in that case twice, you get a string list on the other side. Same for the form scope. I define country here twice, so I will get a string list. So just to prove that, we execute that, and you see I have the form here. When I execute that, you see here I have the URL scope, I have a string list here, and for country I have a string list as well. As you see here, it's mixed together because I had already a string list inside the value, so these two get merged together, and so you don't have a clue where this comes from. You could solve that by using other delimiters here, but another way to solve that is by doing it that way. Here you have the same form, but instead of simply the name, you have brackets after the name, and this tells Lucee to make an array and not a string list. So when I execute that code, to reload it. You see, in that case, I get an array. In both cases, with URL, I get an array, and with the form, and you see now I have these two values separated, and there's no problem. So simply adding brackets behind the name, and then Lucee will create an array. There is also a setting for that in the application scope where you can influence that, but this is a simple way to define it and make it always work independent of the setting in the application CFC. I hope this video was helpful to you. Have a good one.